Welcome to the Safety Net, Brookline Cable, Brookline Interactive Group's TV show, cable TV show, dedicated to domestic violence. But during COVID, we have expanded the range of issues that we discuss. I'm Susan Howard, a criminal defense attorney here in Brookline with a focus on family violence, sexual harassment, elder abuse. But it's not about me. It's about our special guest today, Rita McNally, activist, grandmother, mother, lawyer, chair of the Norfolk County Domestic Violence Roundtable. Welcome, Rita. Rita is a force in promoting education and information about domestic violence here in Brookline. And let me just start off by saying that in 2020, there were 81 domestic violence cases here in Brookline. 1 in 4 are women, 1 in 9 nationwide are men. Rita, what is your take on what's going on in domestic violence today here in Brookline?
Good afternoon. And again, thank you, Susan, for inviting me to speak. You've been a stalwart champion for this terrible topic. And I know that you've had other guests from the domestic violence territory, but I'd like to say that in Brookline, the Domestic Violence Roundtable was set into motion by Stephen Bressler when he was the head of the Human Relations Commission in Brookline. Susan was involved at that time, as I was, and it was called domestic violence. Now we could call it domestic violence, date rape, sexting, trafficking, bullying, suicide. All of those things I just mentioned are now part of that title, because that's what's dragging through our society at this point in time. It's a scary time because at one point we had a fabulous police factor within our high school and our junior high level, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, talking about different issues that come up in town, forming relationships with the kids, trust of an adult person. If any of you out there listening have children that are young, you'll know, sometimes you get an answer and sometimes you don't. High school, you'll get an answer, but it won't be the one you expect or the one
Rita,
that you need.
May I just interrupt for a minute? They raised red flags for the students, for the parents, and for all of us, the curriculum in the high school. It was called the AWARE curriculum, am I correct?
Yes.
And it taught them what to look for in unhealthy relationships, in sexting, in trafficking. And I think February is Teenage Bullying Month. I'm not sure. It's
Never heard a word about it.
We haven't heard a word about it, and I don't think anything's being done. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that I don't know who's raising the red flags today, because I'm hearing that there are fights in the schools, that young adolescents are being sexted. I don't know what you're hearing.
Well, I hear about it throughout Norfolk County, what they are doing and what they are doing with the help of the police. But in our community of Brookline, there's been a multitude of reactions against our police for activities that took place in Minnesota and Georgia and other places. And it was put on that all police act in this manner, which isn't true. Our police are heavily watched, unfortunately, by people like us. But we're there to help them do the right thing and to do it legally. And the police here, when they were in giving their curriculum, and they had a wonderful developed curriculum that won prizes nationally and was copied by other police groups going into schools to help. And it was fine. I mean, it was working. And a great motivation was, it was part diversionary. And you can talk to that. What diversionary means within a courtroom setting. Say a young kid gets picked up and is brought to the courts right away if the cops don't know him or don't know about his problems or whatever. Can you talk to that for a moment?
You know, I was doing juvenile work back in the day when the SROs, the school resource officers, went into the school specifically to keep kids out of the criminal justice system, to
Yeah.
keep them out of DYS, to keep them out of the social services, to keep them in school and on the right track. And it helped a lot. The judges would give deference to the diversionary workers, and many, many kids had a shot at life. I don't know where the misunderstanding that's prevalent in Brookline today has come from. These SROs were there to keep the kids out of the criminal justice system. And believe me, if you're a parent, you don't want any of your children in the criminal justice system at all. And it's a really, really, it's sad to me to think that now the police are only allowed in when it's a crisis, at the end of something. They don't know the children, and they develop fabulous relationships with these kids. And you know what? They would give them breaks. I would see it as a defense attorney. They would cut them some slack and they would help them on their way. And I don't know what's happening now, because I think that this is a travesty.
Well, you know, in the court system, with the police that were part of the school thing, if they heard of one of their kids, the kids that they had gotten to know, was in the court system now, the revolving door, as I call it.
Yeah,
They would go into the court and speak on that kid's behalf,
absolutely.
which encouraged the judge to not slam hard stuff onto that child, but to give them the break they needed and the program. It was the need for programs that the police supplied. And often it was something like a job, hello, a tutor, a language specialist, different kinds of things.
Medical and health related issues. They had resources, and I don't know who has the resources today, because I was a school teacher, and let me tell you, we didn't even have time to teach our classes. There are so many responsibilities put on teachers, and to put another responsibility on them, I don't think it can happen. But I think this is a real crisis, not just in our town, but across the country. But I'm mainly concerned about Brookline, because we discontinued something that every town in Norfolk County wants. Some of them can't afford it. Some of them can't afford it, and we just dismissed them. I don't get it.
And in-service alone won't do it for the teachers, because they don't have time even for the in-service.
Right, right.
And they see kids that are really falling through the cracks. It's a cliche, but it's very true. And they try to reach and help as much as they can, but they don't have the contacts necessarily that the police do to help out, to bring the kids along. And also, you sometimes need a strong masculine presence.
Or a strong feminine presence.
Yes.
Yes. And also,
okay, I'll give myself a little slap for not mentioning that.
That's okay. And our district attorney is very, very involved in all of this. He has a children's center that has resources. Unfortunately, it's a little bit far from Brookline. And we have resources all over town that we could use. But Rita, how can the Domestic Violence Roundtable help? What can they do to help the town in what I consider a period of deep crisis?
This is one way we can help, by getting the message out here and out on the Domestic Violence Roundtable when we have other guests speaking there. The other way is the neighborhood organizations in town with town meeting members who vote on issues, who have no idea about this, because there are so many other things going on in this town about the cost of housing and other things that are going, the rise in taxes, thank you very much. And the money for schools and the school remodeling, and all these things take up people's time. But ultimately, the parents are the mandatory reporters on this. But if they don't know where to go or who to say something to, and sometimes they're sent to maybe a center where the people don't have time to talk to them. They don't have time to build a program with them and then to follow up on it. It's very time consuming. And the relationship building of trust is so difficult to make, but these cops were doing it. They were doing it and they were maintaining it for the kids and following up in summertime and that. And if there were family problems, they were finding the experts to help the family without broadcasting it all around the neighborhood and having people ashamed to go forward with the self-help that they needed as well. That's gone now. We have a hardworking mental health group. They're overwhelmed, really.
Overwhelmed, and the system is overwhelmed. I saw something on the news, I may not have this correct, that a young woman who had a mental health crisis waited 9 months in the emergency room of a major hospital in Boston to get into the ward or the floor where she could get the proper treatment. 9 months.
It's true. It's true. It's not just the COVID beds that are being crowded. It's every bed for a child. At one time, this was, maybe 3 years ago, there were 5 beds in the whole state for teenagers who were trying to get off drugs, a program where they had to have detox and other programs to make it so possible for them to begin functioning to try to get help from doctors. 5 beds. I mean, that to me is insanity. When you have something going on that's destroying kids and they're using it to escape, or they're using it until they finally commit suicide. And I don't know whether the public knows that our suicides aren't published so that it's everybody's business. For young people, they don't publish it in the newspapers anymore. I noticed that it was just once on television that I heard about this child suicide, 9-year-old kid who was bullied until he couldn't handle it anymore. And his parents were overcome with COVID and decisions and working from home and everything else. They couldn't deal with him too, or didn't recognize the signs. And you need
Rita,
a full team approach on this stuff. And it can't be something that's, you mentioned it in your social studies course or something. That's not doing it. It's not doing it. You need strong teamwork that's focused on this and focused on the kids to get them through this.
I received a call. I've received a couple of calls of young people who have been molested sexually. I don't know if it was in the school or not, and went into such a mental state that they tried to commit suicide. They weren't successful. Thank goodness the parents caught it, but now they're under treatment. It took a long time to get the treatment. And if we don't have the AWARE program in the schools, if we don't have the SROs in the school, who is going to see a kid who is falling into what I call a big hole, the kids that's keeping to him or herself, or the kid who's being bullied, or the kid who is being sexting. I mean, they're stripping little girls, taking them into the bathroom and trying to extort money. We'll put these pictures on the internet if you don't pay up. This is what's going on. And we had a very, very, very well-trained force, very well-trained. Other towns and cities in Norfolk County wish they were Brookline. They used to say, you're so lucky you have, a judge said it to me, you're so lucky you have so many resources in this town. And guess what? They're not saying that anymore. Here's what I get in court. Who wants to go to Brookline? What's going on in Brookline? Why are the police leaving in Brookline? And they're not leaving. They're being pushed out, Rita, quite frankly.
It's true. It's true.
The disrespect and the lack of support are some of our best people. And I find that shameful. I don't think anybody should be pushed out of their home. Not a teacher, not a lawyer, nobody. But what can we do? We don't have hours, but what can we do? Can we write our select board? Should we write our town meeting members? Should we make
become a town meeting member and become one of them and help them change? I've got to speak up for them. The town meeting members, you don't see things about these kinds of things about bullying of kids or anything. You don't see it on the internet under town meeting. Town meeting people are talking about things like, low income housing, not enough of it.
Important, that's important.
Yeah, it's important until it comes to their neighborhoods. Then it
Okay.
becomes, it's not going to happen here. And that's too bad, because Brookline didn't always have that kind of an attitude. But I put it down to, there are really such really great people that live here. And I think some of them are worn out from having had to fight every battle. I mean, it's not easy to have made Brookline what it was. It was difficult. It was every year there was some issue, and then there was the Vietnam War, and there was a competition for educational money, and trying to cope with the costs of teachers and the costs of good police, and making sure the police were educated and they continued their education. We
Right.
looked for people like that. It wasn't like, anyone's grandson could get on. In the past, it was kind of like that, but not recently.
Not anymore.
Now it's a whole different kind of educational thing. And you have women that are fabulous, fabulous as police, fabulous as just friends.
And
people that
community
get to know
members
these
and
kids
community.
teachers. They're teachers.
Yes,
They really
and
are. They
teachers.
have it in their bones.
Right, right.
And it takes pressure off of the classroom teacher, off of the few social workers that we have in Brookline, because we can't afford them, or
Right.
we're told that. And then we get into the confrontation between black and white and those kinds of frictions. And I think I heard that we teach 18 languages in Brookline.
Mhm.
That's a lot of difficulty for teachers to manage, and then manage all the kids as well in a COVID situation, and whatever's going on in the house, jobs lost by parents. I mean, there's a
they're
lot
not
of
coming
pressure, and
back.
nobody's
Right.
talking about it except the press, and they kind of speed things up, like, how horrible, and this is happening, and this is happening, there's no hope, this kind of stuff. But I think that we can get help again with the
How,
police.
Rita? How?
Well, I feel that the town meeting people need to be told what's going on and why it's happening, why there's
Mhm.
such a change in attitudes. People aren't looking, they don't know what to look for in the kid, they just know something's different. I was
Right.
in one of the grammar schools 3 years ago, I'm talking pre-COVID, just to help with the program we were doing for the teenagers. And at 10:30, we went down to the cafeteria because they were serving lunch at 10:30.
Mhm.
Lights out, because it was daytime. So the guy that was one of the teachers, who I thought was a bully, said to the kids, sit down, can't stand up, you can't talk to your neighbor, just keep eating, keep eating. And I looked at the kind of food they were serving to, and I said, this isn't good. What are we doing to these kids, And the kids were all scared. And some kids had their jackets on, some didn't. And the guy who was the guy in charge of the lunchroom at that time said, okay, some of you kids are going to go out and play, and you better play right. I mean, what's playing right? It was just the wrong kind of an atmosphere. And I thought, what
I
in
hope
hell,
that's
don't parents
changed,
know what's
Rita.
going on in their schools?
No, no, no. But given that we only have a few minutes, Rita, I think the domestic violence roundtable could spearhead getting the message out, getting messages to parents, meeting with the different precincts, maybe,
Yes.
getting some of the officers and the law enforcement who are involved to meet with the precincts and maybe turn around some of the
We need to
misinformation.
also meet with the school committee, who is very
Yes.
quiet, very
Yes.
quiet about this. It's like they don't want to talk about it. And that's not right. There are elected officials in this town. We have a
Right.
right to know what their plans are. If they're not
Yep.
going to do this kind of an educational relationship building, trust building activity, who is? Are they going to
Domestic
put it on the
violence
teachers?
roundtable is
The
going to
teachers
have to-
union isn't going to accept that it's put
Right.
on the teachers' back. And they're all mandatory reporters. They shouldn't be circling the wagons, keeping everything in the classroom so that nobody knows about it, so that one teacher can just say, well, that seems to be a problem.
Rita, what's a mandatory reporter? They have to report to DCF, Division of Child and
Teachers
Family,
are mandatory when they see
Right.
something happening, when the
Like
child is
abusive.
acting differently and his
abused.
motivation is changed. I keep using the male thing because that's just the way I am. And the kid isn't eating, doesn't look like, isn't
Neglect.
acting correctly, is someone's always saying something to him and smirking, these kinds of things. And there should be someone they're reporting to, either a social worker who's going to handle all this, a headmaster. I don't know what they call the people in elementary school. I think it's the social worker that they would go
Mhm.
to with the problem, as the teacher would go.
But
If-
mandatory reporter is a little more than that. I think it's, if you see a child who you think is being abused or neglected, and that those definitions are very broad, and they're broader than when we were younger, you have a responsibility to call Division of Child and Family Services anonymously, and it's kept anonymous because I work on many of these cases, and report it, and then they're supposed to do an investigation within a certain period of time. I can tell you, because I have a case now, they're not doing it. They're
Yeah.
not doing the
The
investigation
priests
because,
and ministers and rabbis aren't
Right.
doing it either, and they're
Right.
mandatory report. I think, I want to believe it's a case of they don't know that they're mandatory reporters and they don't know what it is.
I don't think so. I think COVID has made things really difficult for
Yes.
all of us, but we can no longer use COVID as a veil. We have to do our jobs. Rita McNally, thank you so much for being so honest on the safety net. And I wish you good luck in your race for town meeting member. And I hope you'll come on again and keep the domestic
Same to
violence
you,
round.
Susan, the same to you.
Keep the domestic violence roundtable moving. Thank you so much, Rita
Going
McNally.
at it. Bye.
Bye.
night.
This is it for the safety net. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Oh, leave.